And Larry Summers also called Abenomics an aggressive and successful macroeconomic reprogramming of sorts. And I suppose my question is, it's not completed, right? That third arrow never quite got off the ground. We know that Governor Kuroda ends his second term in the spring of 2023. So is there still room for Abenomics to be carried out in full in the way that Shinzo Abe imagined it?
Well, it's a little complex now because with the weakening of the yen, with an increase in global inflation, with the war in Ukraine, the situation is extremely different. On top of this, there's what is probably going to continue to be a partial decoupling from China. So the economic situation that Prime Minister Kishida faces today is very different from the one that Abe Shinzo was faced with when he became Prime Minister 10 years ago.
Also complex, of course, Shinzo Abe has been lauded as a statesman who brought regional leaders together, regional countries together, and really rebuilt that strength of the relationship with the US-Japan alliance. What's more mixed, of course, is his reinterpretation of Article 9, the reaction we've seen from Seoul and Beijing, for example. How do you rate the geopolitical and diplomatic aspect of what he tried to do?
I think Abe's contribution to Japan's role in the world is more limited than what a lot of commentators say. On the plus side, he did negotiate the CPTPP after the U.S. left from it. He took some marginal measures to improve Japan's defense, the resources allocated to Japanese defense. On the other hand, I think he failed to see how important the relationship with South Korea was. So I think he gradually put Japan a little more on the world stage, but this had been happening before under previous prime ministers and will probably continue. So I think he had a marginal impact, but probably less significant than we think.
That's interesting. We had a couple of pieces from our Bloomberg teams in Asia. One of them by Mihir Sharma, who says that he believes that Abe's greatest achievement was forging a new Asia. He talks about the person who kind of had this vision of Indo-Pacific, a very broad view of Asia. The person who got the Quad together, which is bringing, major powers together and ultimately trying to have some Asian bloc to counter China's growing power in the region. You don't seem to agree with that.
I think the development of relations with Australia started before, and what's really important is the development of Australia-US relations. The U.S. has started to pay more attention to India starting really in the 1990s. So the Quad is an addition to this, but it's not revolutionary. And as we've seen, of course, in the war that Putin is waging against Ukraine, India is not on board with what are Japanese, Australian, and U.S. policies towards Russia.
In terms of going back to Abenomics and how far it did or didn't get the Japanese economy, Heidi asked, would it have a chance to play out further, particularly with that third leg? I guess I'm really interested, too, in the extent to which it has been a policy, as Larry Summers said, that just tried to reset everything, did end deflation, for example, and did manage to get the economy out of those grim 90s. Does Japan need a new policy? Is that what Kishida has to learn, or are there parts of this that he should hold on to?
Well, I think there are probably parts that he should hold on to. I think the main challenge which Japan faces is demography. The population is declining, rapidly aging. Women are totally underused in the labor force, especially educated women. One needs to think about increasing immigration. These are issues that Abe tried to address, but a lot more needs to be done to, quote-unquote, revitalize Japan.
Even after his premiership finished, he was obviously still a huge influence within the LDP. He was considered a kingmaker. What sort of a gap does that leave now?
Well, it's a major advantage for Suga, for Prime Minister Kishida, because though Kishida is prime minister, Abe remained power behind the throne. There were sometimes rumors that maybe he would even come back to the prime ministership. So this gives Prime Minister Kishida a lot more leeway and removes what was a major obstacle to his having more influence within the party.